The interior of the new Grand Prix was one area where it could keep up with the tradition of the previous generation. A new dash was implemented. Its squared-off design was contrasted by an array of round gauges finished off with a simulated wood trim. Bench seats were available in the base Grand Prix, and a loose pillow version of the bench seat came in the LJ. Bucket seats with see-through headrests came on the SJ, and leather upholstery in a new Viscount pattern was optional on both upper-level models. Pontiac built a total of 228,444 GPs for 78. The standard version garnered the lion's share of the production at 127,253 to be exact, with 65,122 LJs and 36,069 SJs making up the difference. Signaling a corporate trend that would last until this day, the 1979 Grand Prix were almost identical to the previous year, differing only in grille mesh, taillight lenses, and interior appointments. Powertrain changes were limited to two. The V6 was now the base engine on the LJ as well as the base Grand Prix. And breaking a 9.5-year hiatus, a 4-speed manual transmission was made optional with the 301 4-barrel engine. Unfortunately, this manual shift option would prove to be a 1-year only reintroduction, as only 400 units were sold that year. Production for the 1979 year fell to 210,050 units, primarily due to a late season oil shortage that sent many buyers scurrying to the safety of smaller, more economical 4-cylinder compacts. Production breakdown for 79 was as follows: 124,815 base models, 61,175 LJs, and just 24,060 SJs. The 1980 Grand Prix differed so little in appearance from the previous two model years that it really is tough to distinguish one from the other. The changes were limited to the grille and the aforementioned taillight lenses. The differences that were most significant were mechanical. Power plant selection was revised a bit this year. While the base LJ model received a Buick-built V6 as standard equipment, the SJ was fitted with the new EC electronically controlled 301 4-barrel engine. SJ models sent to California received the Chevy-built 305 standard, and it was optional in the base LJ models as well. The new Pontiac-built engine was introduced in 1980 and was made available on the base and LJ versions of the GP. It had 265 cubic inch displacement and was identical to the 301 in many respects. It shared the same basic thin wall casting design principles, though the block was recast to accommodate the smaller 3 3/4 inch bore and the 3-inch stroke that was the same as the 301. In an extremely mild state of tune, the 265 cranked out in a rather anemic 120 horsepower with 210 foot-pounds of torque. The 265 sported an 8.3 to 1 compression ratio and a 2-barrel carb. The engine was a product of the times. It was designed primarily for gas mileage and low emissions. It turned out to be a pretty decent engine in those terms and basically didn't make enough power to hurt itself. So durability was better than average, but compared to the 2.8 liter V6 that was used in the X cars that made 115 horsepower and hauled a lot less weight, it really didn't look that appealing to the public. Had the 265 and 301 stuck around long enough to benefit from heavy-duty component development and modern turbo technology a la Buick Grand National, they would have been extremely powerful engines. High performance was not the agenda of the day, unfortunately, and such upgrading was really never explored. Pontiac built 110,819 Grand Prix for 1980, almost 100,000 units less than the previous year. This again was due to the aftermath of the second oil shortage that had buyers turning to smaller cars. Breakdown was 72,659 base models, 34,968 LJs, and only a meager 7,087 SJs. With the spiraling sales, Pontiac gave the 1981 Grand Prix all-new sheet metal, giving it a cleaner, more aerodynamic look. Forming a sleek wedge shape, the Pontiac designers raised the rear deck while simultaneously lowering the nose in a like amount. The bumpers were now urethane with a bright metal lower section. Styling changes were very attractive and eliminated the awkward boxy look of the previous 3 years. Aerodynamic drag was reduced by a whopping 20%, and this new Grand Prix would now become a fan favorite of NASCAR. It was at this time that Pontiac began a long and successful relationship with NASCAR legend Richard Petty. Power plant choices for 1981 were again revised. The 301 was deleted from the lineup, although it was available in other Pontiacs. The 231 Buick V6 returned, as did the 265 Pontiac. A third engine was made optional for the GP. It was, of course, the much misaligned 350 Oldsmobile diesel, belching out 105 horsepower and 205 foot-pounds of torque. The diesel would go down in history as the most trouble-prone engine ever produced by GM, next to the copper-cooled Chevy of 1923. With the exception of the 1986 Grand Prix 2+2, Grand Prix of the 1981-87 model years were almost completely identical from a cosmetic point of view. It seemed as though most of the development for this generation of the Grand Prix stopped at this time, and really all they paid attention to was keeping up with the CAF standards. Production for 81 was 147,711 units, 74,786 of the base model, 46,842 LJs, and 26,083 of the new Brougham models. For 1982, the diesel was the only V8 engine available in the Grand Prix, the 265 Pontiac engine, which traced its roots all the way back to 1955, was dropped. The other two engines available were the 231 Buick V6 and the new larger 252 cubic inch version. That year would ultimately go down as a low water mark for the Grand Prix. At that point in time, the Pontiac Motor Division itself was in danger of being phased out completely, and the dealer structure integrated now with Oldsmobile. Things were truly dim for the wide track camp. Production plummeted in 1982 to 37,672 base cars, 29,726 LJs, and just 12,969 Broughams for a total of 80,367 units. For 1983, the Grand Prix would once again receive a V8 engine. Although it was a 305 four-barrel corporate engine sourced from Chevrolet, it replaced the 252 Buick V6, which was deleted from the GP lineup. Production numbers were up slightly this year to 87,798, including 41,511 base cars, 33,785 LJs, and 10,502 Broughams. In 1984, the LJ name was replaced with the LE, and the 4-speed automatic was offered with the 305. The familiar snowflake wheels were replaced with new turbo-finned aluminum design. Production slid to 77,444 units, with 36,983 base models, 31,037 LEs, and 9,514 Broughams. For the 1985 model year, the Grand Prix was almost a complete carryover from the previous year, except a revised grille bar design and the deletion of the diesel Oldsmobile power plant. Once again, production totals continued to drop. 59,783 units this year, with 30,365 base, 21,195 LEs, and just 8,223 bromes. 1986 was a significant year for the Grand Prix because it was the only year that the 2+2, a NASCAR-inspired straight machine, was available, borrowing its name from the famous Catalina-bodied factory hot rod of the mid-1960s. The shape of the new 2+2 on its production version was indeed a slippery piece. Up front, the front fascia panel was constructed of urethane and was heavily sloped. The grille was a honeycomb mesh pattern, and the front spoiler provided additional cooling and reduced wind resistance. The rear section of the car was heavily modified as well. The aerodynamically inefficient notchback roof design was smoothed over with a large bubble-like rear window and an abbreviated trunk lid with a rear spoiler. Unfortunately, the performance of the 2+2 was not nearly as exciting as its racy exterior might suggest. The only available power plant was a 165 horsepower 305 4-barrel hooked up to a 4-speed automatic transmission. This was the same power plant that you could order in a regular GP. And unfortunately, it was a far cry from the underrated 235 horsepower Buick Grand National engine, or even the 190 horsepower high output 305 that came in the Monte Carlo SS of the same period. The exterior of all regular production 2+2s came in only one way, an attractive two-tone paint scheme, featuring silver above the belt line, charcoal gray below, and a red accent striping between the two. The color scheme was also accented with blacked-out window trim. Although the Grand Prix 2+2 fell short of most enthusiasts' expectations in terms of performance, it was still a very attractive design. When one considers, though, that this car was a result of Pontiac's desire to further themselves into factory racing efforts, its true merits really did become apparent. That sort of thinking had not been part of Pontiac since January of 1963, when GM pulled out of auto racing. Unfortunately, production totals for 1986 were continuing to fall. Total production numbers were 40,384. 21,668 of that were base models, 13,918 were LEs, and just 4,798 were Brougham models. When the 1987 model year rolled around, the Grand Prix 2+2 did not return, though it had been speculated that the production would continue for a second model year. It did not. This would prove to be the final year of the G-Body Grand Prix. As one would expect, production just continued to tumble. Just 16,542 units were sold that year, 8,599 base, 6,226 LEs, and just an abysmal 1,717 Bromes. After years of non-development and being lost in the crowd, the rear-wheel GP would finally be put to rest. Don't forget to like the video before you leave a comment below, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified of any upcoming videos. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.